The sun hung low and merciless over the Arizona desert, turning the sand into waves of shimmering heat that made the horizon dance like a fever dream. And that was when Wade Donovan spotted what looked like a bundle of torn fabric crumpled against a cluster of rocks about 50 yards off the trail. He reined in his bay mare, squinting through the late afternoon glare, wondering if the heat was playing tricks on his eyes again. But then the fabric moved, just slightly, and Wade's heart kicked hard against his ribs. He urged his horse forward, the animal's hooves kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. And as he drew closer, he realized with a jolt that it was not fabric at all but a woman. Her dress torn and sun-bleached, her dark hair matted with sand and sweat. Wade dismounted before his mare had fully stopped, his boots hitting the ground hard as he rushed toward the collapsed figure. She was alive. He could see that much from the shallow rise and fall of her chest, but just barely. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, her skin burned red in some places and frighteningly pale in others. He dropped to his knees beside her, his canteen already in his hands. "Madam," he said, his voice rough from his own day in the sun. "Madam, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered but did not open. Wade uncorked his canteen and carefully tilted it to her lips, letting just a few drops of water touch her mouth. She stirred at that, her lips parting slightly, and he gave her a bit more. He had to be careful, he knew that much. Too much water too fast after severe dehydration could make things worse. "Come on now," he murmured, one hand supporting the back of her head. "Just a little at a time. That's it." Her eyes opened then, just slits at first, and he found himself looking into the palest blue eyes he had ever seen. They were unfocused, confused, but there was awareness there. She tried to speak, but only a cracked whisper came out. "Easy," Wade said. "Do not try to talk just yet. You are safe with me now." She blinked slowly, those blue eyes trying to focus on his face. He gave her another careful sip of water, then shrugged out of his vest and used it to shield her face from the direct sunlight. The temperature had to be pushing 110 degrees, maybe more, and she had clearly been out here for some time. He glanced around, looking for any sign of a wagon, a horse, anything that might explain how a woman ended up alone in the middle of the Arizona desert. There was nothing but endless sand, scattered rock formations, and the stubborn desert plants that somehow managed to survive in this hell. "Can you tell me your name?" Wade asked, keeping his voice gentle. Her lips moved again, and this time a whisper emerged. Amelia, Amelia," he repeated. "That is a fine name. I am Wade, Wade Donovan. I am going to get you out of here, but I need to know if you are hurt anywhere besides the sun damage. Can you move your arms and legs?" She tried, and he watched as she managed to shift her fingers, then her arms. Her legs moved too, though the effort seemed to exhaust her. No broken bones then, at least none that were obvious. That was something. "Good," Wade said. "That is real good, Amelia. Now I am going to lift you up and get you on my horse. We need to get you somewhere with shade and more water. The closest place is Eager, about 15 miles northeast. Think you can hold on that long?" She managed the smallest of nods, and Wade wasted no time. He was a big man, well over 6 feet and broad-shouldered from years of ranch work, and she weighed almost nothing in his arms. It worried him how light she was, how fragile she felt as he carefully lifted her. He settled her in the saddle first, then swung up behind her, arranging her so that she leaned back against his chest. He wrapped one arm around her waist to keep her steady and took the reins with the other. "Hold on to my arm if you can," he told her, and he felt her thin fingers curl weakly around his forearm. "That is good. Just stay with me now. We will have you somewhere safe before you know it." He urged his mare into a steady walk, not wanting to jostle Amelia too much, but knowing they needed to cover ground before nightfall. The desert was brutal during the day, but it turned deadly cold once the sun went down. And in her condition, Amelia would not survive that kind of temperature swing. His mare, a good-tempered animal named Rosie, seemed to sense the urgency and moved with purpose despite the heat and the extra weight. As they rode, Wade could feel Amelia drifting in and out of consciousness against him. Every few minutes, he would give her another small sip from his canteen, making sure she kept taking in water. He talked to her too, keeping up a steady stream of conversation even when she did not respond, figuring the sound of his voice might help anchor her. "Found you about 3 miles south of Willow Creek Pass," he said. "I was heading back to my ranch after delivering some horses to a buyer in Show Low. That is about 30 miles west of here. Been ranching in these parts for near about 5 years now. Got a decent spread, nothing fancy but honest work." He paused to give her more water, and this time she swallowed a bit more easily. "You have been out in that sun for a while, I reckon," Wade continued. "Your dress looks like it has been through hell and back. Do you remember what happened? How you ended up out there?" For a long moment there was no response, and then he felt her stir against him. "Stage," she whispered. "The stage was attacked." Wade's jaw tightened. "Outlaws." "Yes." The word was barely audible. "They took everything, shot the driver, left me." "When was this?" "I do not know. Yesterday, maybe longer." Wade did some quick calculating. If the attack had happened yesterday and she had been wandering or lying out in the sun since then, it was a miracle she was still alive. He had seen strong men die from less exposure than that. "Anyone else on the stage with you?" he asked. "An older couple. The outlaws took them too. I just ran." "You did the right thing," Wade assured her. "Running kept you alive." She did not respond to that, and he felt her weight grow heavier against him as she slipped back into unconsciousness. He tightened his arm around her waist and pushed Rosie a bit faster. The sun was getting lower now, painting the desert in shades of orange and red, and Wade knew they still had at least 10 miles to cover. The landscape began to change gradually as they rode, the flat desert giving way to slightly more varied terrain. Juniper trees started to appear, then ponderosa pines, signs that they were climbing into higher elevation. The air grew marginally cooler, though it was still plenty hot. Wade kept checking on Amelia, making sure she was still breathing, still holding on. A few times she stirred and he gave her more water, and once she opened her eyes fully and looked up at him. "You are real," she murmured, as if she had been wondering whether he was just a fever dream. "As real as they come," Wade said with a small smile. "And so is eager. We will be there soon." "Why did you help me?" The question caught him off guard. "What kind of man would I be if I rode past someone who needed help?" She seemed to consider that, her blue eyes studying his face with an intensity that surprised him given her condition. Then her eyes drifted closed again, but he thought he saw the faintest hint of a smile on those cracked lips. Darkness was falling in earnest by the time Wade spotted the lights of Eager in the distance. The town was not much to look at, just a collection of buildings clustered around a main street, but right now it looked like paradise. He guided Rosie straight to the doctor's office, which was marked by a weathered sign hanging above the door. Wade dismounted carefully, keeping Amelia steady, then lifted her down from the saddle. She was unconscious again, her head lolling against his shoulder. He kicked at the door, not having a free hand to knock properly. Doc Howard, I need help out here." A moment later, the door swung open to reveal a man in his 50s with wire-rimmed spectacles and thinning gray hair. Dr. Silas Howard took one look at Amelia and immediately stepped aside. "Bring her in." "What happened?" "Found her in the desert," Wade said, carrying Amelia inside and laying her on the examination table that dominated the center of the room. She said her stage was attacked, probably 24 hours ago or more. She has been in the sun this whole time. Doc Howard was already examining her, checking her pulse, looking at her pupils. Severe dehydration, sun exposure, possible heat stroke. You did right getting water into her. How much did she drink? Maybe half a canteen over the course of the ride here. I gave it to her slow. Good man. That likely saved her life. The doctor was moving efficiently now, preparing supplies. I will need to get more fluids in her, treat these burns, get her temperature down. She is going to need round-the-clock care for the next few days. Whatever she needs, Wade said immediately. I will cover the costs. Doc Howard glanced at him. You know this woman. Never saw her before I found her today. The doctor nodded, a look of approval crossing his face. Well, she is lucky you came along when you did. Another few hours and we would be having a very different conversation. You can wait out in the front room if you like. This is going to take a while. Wade hesitated, his eyes on Amelia's pale face. He knew he should leave, should let the doctor work, but something made him reluctant to go. Finally, he nodded and made his way to the front room, where a couple of worn chairs sat against the wall. He dropped into one of them, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. The ride from Show Low had been long even before he found Amelia, and the rush to get her to town had taken whatever reserves he had left. Time passed slowly. Wade could hear Doc Howard moving around in the other room, could hear the occasional clink of glass or metal. At some point the doctor's wife, Clara, arrived and went into the back room to help. Wade dozed off in the chair, his head propped against the wall, and woke with a start when Doc Howard emerged sometime later. She is stable, the doctor announced, wiping his hands on a cloth. Still unconscious, but that is probably for the best right now. Her body needs rest. The burns are superficial, thankfully, and I have gotten a good amount of water and salt solution into her. Temperature is coming down. I would say she has a good chance of pulling through. Wade felt relief wash over him. Can I see her for a minute? She needs quiet, but I suppose you have earned that much. Wade followed the doctor into the back room. Amelia lay on the examination table, now covered with a light sheet. Someone had cleaned the dirt and sand from her face, and her dark hair had been combed back. Even sick as she was, Wade could see that she was beautiful, with fine features and those striking pale blue eyes, currently hidden behind closed lids. She said there were others, Wade said quietly. An older couple. The outlaws took them. Doc Howard's expression darkened. I will send word to the sheriff first thing in the morning. Tom Brennan will want to know about this. There has been a gang operating in these parts for the past few months. Could be them. She mentioned the driver was shot. We will organize a search party, see if we can find the stage and any survivors, though if the driver was shot. The doctor trailed off, not needing to finish the thought. Wade looked back at Amelia. Where will she stay once she is well enough to leave here? There is a boarding house in town run by Mrs. Patterson. Clean rooms, decent food. I will arrange it, Wade said. And if she needs anything else, send word to my ranch. It is about 8 miles northeast, the Donovan place. I know it. You have done a good thing today, Wade. Wade just nodded, his eyes still on the woman he had pulled from the desert. He did not feel like he had done anything particularly heroic. It was just what anyone with a shred of decency would do. But looking at her now, seeing how close she had come to dying out there, he felt something stir in his chest. A protectiveness, maybe, or a sense of responsibility. He had found her, saved her, and now he felt connected to her in some way he could not quite explain. I will check back tomorrow, he told Doc Howard, then reluctantly headed for the door. He had a horse to stable and his own exhaustion to deal with, but he knew he would not rest easy until he knew Amelia was truly going to be all right. The next morning brought clearer skies and slightly cooler temperatures, though it was still plenty warm. Wade was up early, having spent the night at the small room he kept above the saloon for occasions when he needed to stay in town. He washed up, changed into a clean shirt, and headed straight for Doc Howard's office. Clara Howard answered the door, a kind-faced woman in her 50s with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Mr. Donovan," she said with a smile. "I thought we might see you early. She is awake." Wade felt his heart skip. "How is she? Doing much better than expected. The doctor is with her now. Go on back." Wade made his way to the back room and found Doc Howard checking Amelia's pulse while she sat propped up on the examination table, looking infinitely better than she had the night before. Her color was improved, her eyes were clear and alert, and though she still looked weak, there was life in her face. Those blue eyes turned to Wade as he entered, and he saw recognition there. "You," she said, her voice still hoarse but much stronger than before. "You are real. I thought maybe I dreamed you." "I am real enough," Wade said, stopping a respectful distance away and holding his hat in his hands. "It is good to see you awake, Miss Prescott," she supplied. "Amelia Prescott, and I owe you my life, Mr. Donovan." "Wade," he corrected. "And you do not owe me anything. I am just glad I came along when I did." Doc Howard cleared his throat. "Well, Miss Prescott, you are going to need several more days of rest and recovery, but I think the worst is behind you. You are going to have to be careful about sun exposure for a while, and you will need to keep drinking plenty of water. No strenuous activity." "I understand," Amelia said. She looked back at Wade. "The doctor told me you arranged for a room at the boarding house." "That is very generous, but I cannot accept such charity. I will find a way to repay you." "We can worry about that later," Wade said. "Right now you just need to focus on getting well." Amelia studied him for a long moment, and Wade found himself oddly self-conscious under that clear blue gaze. He was not a vain man, did not spend much time thinking about his appearance, but he found himself wondering what she saw when she looked at him. A weathered cowboy, certainly, with sun-darkened skin and lines at the corners of his eyes from years of squinting into the distance. He kept his dark hair short and his face clean-shaven, and he supposed he was decent-looking enough, but he had never been the type to turn heads. "You are not what I expected," Amelia said finally. Wade raised an eyebrow. "What did you expect?" "I do not know. Someone harder, maybe. More rough around the edges, but you have been nothing but kind." Wade felt heat rise to his face, unaccustomed to such direct praise. "Well," he said, not quite knowing how to respond. "Like I said, it was the decent thing to do." "Decent?" Amelia repeated softly, a small smile playing at her lips. "Yes, I suppose it was." Doc Howard cleared his throat again, looking amused. "Well, I will leave you two to talk. Miss Prescott, you should stay here for today at least. Tomorrow we can see about moving you to the boarding house if you are feeling up to it." After the doctor left, an awkward silence fell. Wade shifted his weight from one foot to the other, suddenly feeling like he did not know what to do with his hands. Amelia watched him with those clear blue eyes, and he got the sense that she was a woman who did not miss much. "Where are you from?" Wade asked finally, figuring conversation was better than standing there like a fool. "Philadelphia," Amelia said. "Pennsylvania." Wade let out a low whistle. "That is a long way from here. What brought you out west?" Amelia's expression grew more guarded. "I was traveling to San Francisco to meet my uncle. He has a shipping business there and offered me a position as his secretary. After my parents died last year, there was nothing left for me in Philadelphia. No family, no prospects. When my uncle's letter arrived, it seemed like a sign." "I am sorry about your parents," Wade said quietly. "Thank you. It has been difficult, but staying in Philadelphia would have been harder. Too many memories." She paused, then asked, "What about you? Have you always lived in Arizona?" "No, madam. Grew up in Texas, worked cattle drives for several years before I saved up enough to buy my own place. Came to Arizona about 5 years back and never looked back. It is hard country, but it is honest. A man can make something of himself here if he is willing to work for it." "And you have made something of yourself," Wade shrugged. "I've got a ranch, some good horses, a few head of cattle. It is not a big operation, but it is mine." "That counts for something." "It counts for a lot," Amelia said. "There is something to be said for independence." Before Wade could respond, Sheriff Tom Brennan arrived, a tall man in his 40s with a thick mustache and a no-nonsense demeanor. He nodded to Wade, then turned his attention to Amelia. "Miss Prescott, I am Sheriff Brennan. I hate to trouble you when you are recovering, but I need to ask you some questions about the attack on your stage." Amelia straightened, though Wade could see the effort it cost her. "Of course, Sheriff." "How many men attacked the stage?" "4," Amelia said without hesitation. "They came out of nowhere firing shots. The driver tried to outrun them, but they shot one of the horses and we crashed. The driver was killed in the crash, or maybe they shot him after. I am not entirely sure. Everything happened so fast." "Can you describe the men?" "They wore bandanas covering their faces. One was tall, very tall, over 6 feet. He seemed to be the leader. Another was shorter and stocky. I remember he had a scar on his hand, a bad one, like a burn. The other two I did not see as clearly." Sheriff Brennan was taking notes in a small book. "What did they take?" "Everything. The strongbox from the stage, all the passengers' belongings. The older couple, the Hendersons, they tried to hide Mrs. Henderson's wedding ring, but the outlaws found it. They were so rough with them, treating them like—" Her voice wavered, "like they were nothing. Where are the Hendersons now?" "The outlaws took them. I do not know why. They were going to take me too, but I ran. One of them came after me, but I managed to lose him in some rocks. I just kept running until I could not run anymore, and then I just walked. I do not even know which direction I was going." "You are lucky to be alive, Miss Prescott," Brennan said gravely. "This sounds like the Keller gang. They have been hitting stages and small banks all through this territory for months now. Usually they do not leave witnesses." "The Hendersons," Amelia said urgently. "Can you find them? Are they still alive?" "I will organize a search party today," the sheriff promised. "We will find the stage, see what we can learn. If the Hendersons are still alive, we will do everything we can to get them back safely." After the sheriff left, Amelia slumped back against the pillows, the conversation having clearly exhausted her. Wade moved to leave, not wanting to tire her further, but she reached out and caught his hand. "Wade," she said, and he liked the way his name sounded in her voice. "Thank you, not just for saving me, but for staying, for caring what happened." "Get some rest," Wade said gently, giving her hand a light squeeze before releasing it. "I will check on you tomorrow." He left the doctor's office and spent the rest of the day helping Sheriff Brennan and his deputies search for the wrecked stage. They found it about 10 miles south, right where Amelia had said it would be. The driver was indeed dead, his body already being picked at by vultures. They buried him there in the desert, saying a few words over the grave. Of the Hendersons or the outlaws, there was no sign beyond tracks leading west into even rougher country. "We will keep looking," Brennan said as they prepared to ride back to Eager. "But if the Kellers took them west, they could be anywhere by now. That is hard country out there, not many towns, lots of places to hide." Wade knew the sheriff was right, but it did not make the situation any easier. He thought about having to tell Amelia that the Hendersons might not be found, and his gut clenched. She had been through enough already. Over the next few days, Wade found himself riding into Eager more often than he needed to, always with some excuse. He needed supplies from the general store. He had business with the livery. He was checking on Rosie, who he had stabled in town. Each time, he would stop by to see Amelia, and each time he found her a little stronger, a little more herself. Doc Howard moved her to Mrs. Patterson's boarding house on the third day, declaring her well enough for the transition. The boarding house was a 2-story building at the edge of town, run by a widow named Ruth Patterson, who had a reputation for keeping a clean establishment and cooking the best meals in Eager. Wade helped move Amelia, carrying her few belongings, which consisted mainly of a carpetbag that Sheriff Brennan had recovered from the wrecked stage. "Not much to show for a life," Amelia said ruefully as Wade set the bag on the dresser in her small but tidy room. "You are alive," Wade said. "Everything else can be replaced." Amelia looked at him, and there was something in her expression that made Wade's heart beat faster. "You have a way of putting things in perspective." "Someone has to." He smiled, then shifted awkwardly. "Well, I should let you settle in." "Wade, wait." Amelia moved to the window, looking out at the dusty street below. "I have been thinking. Once I am fully recovered, I will need to find work. I cannot continue accepting charity, no matter how well-intentioned. Do you know of anyone in town who might be hiring?" "I can read and write, I am good with numbers, and I am a hard worker," Wade considered. "The bank might need someone, and the general store is run by a couple who are getting on in years. They might appreciate the help. I can ask around if you like." "I would appreciate that very much." As the days turned into a week, Wade found himself increasingly drawn to Amelia. It was not just her beauty, though he would be lying if he said that did not play a part. It was her strength, her resilience. She had been through an ordeal that would have broken many people, but she was already thinking about the future, about standing on her own 2 feet. There was a dignity about her that Wade admired deeply. They fell into an easy companionship. Wade would stop by in the evenings after his work was done, and they would sit in Mrs. Patterson's parlor and talk. Amelia told him about Philadelphia, about growing up in a city so different from the wide, open spaces of Arizona. She talked about her parents, her father who had been a school teacher and her mother who had taken in sewing to make ends meet. She spoke of the grief of losing them both within 6 months of each other, her father to a heart condition and her mother to influenza. Wade, in turn, told her about Texas, about the cattle drives that had been his life from the age of 15. He described the endless days in the saddle, the nights under the stars, the camaraderie and the hardship. He spoke of the dream that had driven him to save every dollar he could, the dream of having his own land, answering to no one but himself. "You ever get lonely?" Amelia asked one evening as they sat on Mrs. Patterson's front porch, watching the sun set in a blaze of orange and purple. Wade thought about it. "Sometimes," he admitted. "The ranch keeps me busy, but there are nights when the silence gets heavy. I always figured I would find someone eventually, settle down properly, but the right person never came along." "What would the right person be like?" The question was casual, but Wade sensed genuine curiosity behind it. "Someone strong," he said slowly, thinking it through as he spoke. "Not just physically, but in spirit. Someone who could handle the hard life out here without losing themselves. Someone who could see past the rough edges to the good underneath." He paused, then added with a slight smile, "Someone who could beat me at checkers would not hurt either." Amelia laughed, a sound that Wade had come to treasure. "I am quite good at checkers, I will have you know." "Is that so?" "Well, we will have to test that claim sometime." They did the very next evening, using a worn set that Mrs. Patterson kept in the parlor. Amelia won the first game handily, and Wade accused her of hustling him. She just smiled and suggested they play again. By the end of the evening, they were tied at 3 games apiece, and Wade could not remember the last time he had enjoyed himself so much. 2 weeks after finding Amelia in the desert, Sheriff Brennan came by Mrs. Patterson's with news. Wade happened to be there, having stopped by with a basket of eggs from his chickens. The look on the sheriff's face told them both that the news was not good before he even spoke. "We found the Hendersons," Brennan said heavily, "or what was left of them. Looks like the Kellers shot them and left them in a canyon about 30 miles west of here. I am sorry, Miss Prescott." Amelia's face went white. "Both of them?" "Yes, madam. We brought the bodies back and the pastor will give them a proper burial tomorrow." After the sheriff left, Amelia sat very still, staring at nothing. Wade wanted to say something comforting but could not find the words. Finally, he just sat beside her and took her hand. She held on tight, her fingers cold despite the warm evening. "They were kind people," she said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Henderson told me about his grandchildren. He was going to San Francisco to see his daughter. She just had a baby. He was so excited to meet his new grandson." "I am sorry," Wade said, knowing the words were inadequate but not knowing what else to offer. "It should have been me," Amelia said. "I was younger, faster. That is why I got away and they did not. If I had stayed, if I had tried to help them instead of running." "Then you would be dead too," Wade said firmly. "And that would not have saved them. You did what you had to do to survive, Amelia. There is no shame in that. It does not feel that way." Wade turned her to face him, his hands gentle but insistent on her shoulders. "Listen to me. Those outlaws killed the Hendersons. Not you. You did not pull the trigger. You did not choose to attack that stage. You are not responsible for the evil that other people do." Tears spilled down Amelia's cheeks, the first time Wade had seen her cry. "I just feel so guilty." "I know," Wade said softly, pulling her into his arms. She came without resistance, burying her face against his chest as she wept. He held her, one hand stroking her hair, wishing he could take away her pain. "I know, and that guilt is natural, but it is not deserved. You have to remember that." They stayed like that for a long time, until Amelia's tears subsided and she pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I am sorry," she said. "I did not mean to fall apart like that." "You have every right to fall apart," Wade assured her. "You have been holding yourself together through something terrible. Sometimes you just need to let it out." Amelia managed a watery smile. "You are a good man, Wade Donovan. I try to be." The next day, Wade accompanied Amelia to the funeral. The whole town turned out, despite the fact that the Hendersons had just been passing through. That was the way of things out here. Life was hard and death came too easy, so people banded together when they could, offering what comfort and support was available. The pastor said some words about eternal rest and the cruelty of evil men, and then the Hendersons were laid to rest in the small cemetery on the edge of town. After the service, Amelia stood by the graves for a long time. Wade waited a respectful distance away, giving her space to say her private goodbyes. When she finally turned and walked back to him, there was a new determination in her eyes. "I am not going to San Francisco," she announced. Wade blinked, surprised. "What? I am not going," Amelia repeated. "I have been thinking about it. My uncle's offer was generous, but it was never what I really wanted. I was just running away from grief, trying to start over somewhere new. But starting over does not mean running to a city where I will know no one and spend my days in an office writing letters for someone else's business." "What do you want?" Wade asked. Amelia looked around at the dusty town, the distant mountains, the endless sky. "I want to stay here." I know it sounds crazy. I barely know this place, barely know anyone here, but…" She looked at Wade. "I feel like I belong here, like I was meant to end up here despite everything terrible that happened. Does that make any sense?" "It makes perfect sense," Wade said, and he realized his heart was pounding. The thought of Amelia leaving, of her getting on another stage and disappearing to San Francisco, had been bothering him more than he wanted to admit. The fact that she wanted to stay filled him with a joy he could barely contain. "I will need to find work," Amelia said. "Real work, not just charity. I meant what I said about standing on my own feet." "The bank," Wade said immediately. "I talked to Harrison Wells, the manager. He said he could use someone to help with bookkeeping and customer accounts. It is not glamorous work, but it pays decent." "I will talk to him," Amelia said. "And Wade, thank you for everything." Amelia started at the bank the following week. Mr. Wells, a fastidious man in his 60s with a perpetually worried expression, quickly realized he had found a treasure. Amelia was quick with numbers, organized, and had a pleasant manner that put customers at ease. Within days, she was indispensable. Wade continued to visit her regularly, and somewhere along the way, their relationship shifted from friendly to something more. It was small things at first. The way Wade's hand would linger on Amelia's when he helped her into the wagon. The way Amelia would lean just a bit closer to Wade when they sat together on the porch. The way they would find excuses to spend more time together, even when there was work to be done. One Saturday, Wade invited Amelia to come see his ranch. "I know you have been working hard all week," he said. "I thought you might enjoy getting out of town for a day. I promise the scenery is better than Main Street." Amelia's face lit up. "I would love that." Wade picked her up early the next morning in his wagon, a sturdy vehicle pulled by a matched pair of horses. Amelia wore a simple cotton dress and a wide-brimmed hat to protect her from the sun. She still had to be careful about sun exposure, though the burns had healed well and left only the faintest marks on her skin. The ride to Wade's ranch took about an hour, following a rough trail that wound through increasingly beautiful country. They climbed out of the lower desert into foothills dotted with juniper and pine. A creek ran through parts of the trail, the sound of running water a pleasant counterpoint to the steady clopping of the horses' hooves. "It is beautiful here," Amelia said, looking around with obvious delight. "I had no idea there was so much green just a few miles from town." "Wait until you see the ranch," Wade said, pleased by her reaction. "It gets even better." He was not exaggerating. The ranch sat in a small valley surrounded by rolling hills, with the creek running right through the property. The ranch house was modest but well built, a single-story structure of wood and stone with a wide porch that looked out over the valley. There was a barn, a stable, several corrals, and a few outbuildings. It was not a fancy spread by any means, but it was well maintained and clearly the product of hard work and care. Wade helped Amelia down from the wagon and led her on a tour. He showed her the horses, about 20 of them ranging from green-broke youngsters to experienced working animals. He showed her his small herd of cattle, maybe 40 head grazing in the far pasture. He showed her the vegetable garden he maintained behind the house, a source of pride even though he would never admit it to the other ranchers. "You did all this yourself?" Amelia asked, clearly impressed. "Had some help getting started," Wade admitted. "My neighbor, Frank Sullivan, helped me raise the barn, and I hired some hands for roundup and branding, but mostly, yes, it has been just me." "It is incredible, Wade. You should be very proud." They spent the afternoon at the ranch. Wade cooked lunch, a simple meal of bacon, beans, and fresh bread that he had bought from Mrs. Patterson. They ate on the porch, looking out over the valley, and talked about everything and nothing. Amelia asked questions about ranching, genuinely interested in the details of Wade's work. He found himself telling her things he rarely discussed: the challenges of keeping livestock healthy, the constant battle against drought and predators, the satisfaction of watching a wild horse learn to trust. "You ever think about expanding?" Amelia asked. "Getting more land, more cattle?" Wade shrugged. "Sometimes, but that would require more hands, more money, more complications. I like things the way they are, simple, manageable, mine." "There is something to be said for that," Amelia agreed. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Can I confess something?" "Of course." "When I left Philadelphia, I thought I wanted to be somewhere big and bustling, somewhere that would distract me from my grief. San Francisco seemed perfect, but being here, seeing this—" She gestured at the valley spread before them. "This is what I really wanted, even if I did not know it. Space, peace, a place where a person can breathe. You can find that here," Wade said quietly, "if you want it." Amelia looked at him, and Wade saw something in her eyes that made his breath catch. "I think I do want it, very much." They were sitting close together on the porch steps, close enough that Wade could smell the faint scent of lavender soap on her skin. He found himself leaning toward her, drawn by a force he could not resist and did not want to. Amelia leaned in too, her eyes drifting closed, and then their lips met in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and perfect. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "I have wanted to do that for a while now," Wade admitted. "I know," Amelia said. "I wanted you to. Why did you not say anything?" "I was afraid I was imagining things. That maybe you were just being kind to the poor woman you rescued from the desert." Wade cupped her face in his hands, looking into those incredible blue eyes. "I am not that kind. I care about you, Amelia. More than I probably should after such a short time, but I cannot help it. You are remarkable." "I care about you too," Amelia said softly. "You make me feel safe, not just physically, although you did literally save my life, but safe in a deeper way, like I can be myself without pretense. That is a rare thing." They kissed again, longer this time, and Wade felt like his heart might burst from happiness. He had not been looking for love when he found Amelia in the desert. He had just been doing what any decent person would do. But somehow, in the process of saving her life, she had become the most important person in his. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of pink and gold, Wade reluctantly suggested they should head back to town. He did not want to, would have been happy to stay on that porch with Amelia forever. But he knew Mrs. Patterson would worry if they were out after dark. The ride back to Eager was different from the morning journey. Wade and Amelia sat close together on the wagon bench, her hand in his, comfortable in each other's presence. They did not talk much, content with the silence and the growing certainty that something significant had shifted between them. When Wade left Amelia at the boarding house, he kissed her good night on the porch, not caring who might see. "Can I see you tomorrow?" he asked. "I would be disappointed if you did not," Amelia replied with a smile. Over the following months, Wade and Amelia's relationship deepened. They were together whenever Wade was in town, and Amelia began spending more time at the ranch on her days off. She proved to be a surprisingly good rider, taking to horses with a natural grace that impressed Wade. She also showed an interest in learning about ranching, asking intelligent questions and actually listening to the answers. "You do not have to learn all this," Wade told her one day as he was teaching her how to rope a fence post. "It is not exactly refined knowledge for a city girl." "I am not a city girl anymore," Amelia said firmly, successfully lassoing the post on her third try. "And I want to understand your world. It is important to me." Wade could not help but grin. "You are something special, you know that?" "I do now," Amelia said with a playful smile. By the time summer gave way to fall, Wade knew he wanted to marry Amelia. The question was not if but when and how. He wanted to do it right, wanted to give her a proposal that meant something. He spent weeks thinking about it, planning, trying to find the perfect moment. That moment came on a crisp October evening. Wade had taken Amelia back to the ranch for dinner, and afterward they walked down to the creek that ran through his property. The cottonwood trees along the bank had turned golden, and the setting sun made the leaves glow like fire. It was one of those perfect moments that felt suspended in time, beautiful and peaceful and right. They sat on a flat rock beside the water, watching it flow past, neither feeling the need to fill the silence with words. Finally, Wade turned to Amelia and took her hands in his. "I have been thinking," he began, and Amelia smiled. "That is usually a dangerous thing." "Probably," Wade agreed, "but I am going to say this anyway. Amelia, when I found you in that desert, I had no idea you were going to change my life. I was just trying to help someone in need. But over these past months, you have become everything to me. You make me laugh, you challenge me, you make me want to be better than I am. I love you, Amelia Prescott, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" Amelia's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, Wade, I will marry you." Wade pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. When they finally broke apart, both were grinning like fools. "I do not have a ring yet," Wade admitted. "I wanted to ask you first, make sure you said yes before I spent the money." Amelia laughed. "Ever practical, I love that about you, and I do not need anything fancy, just something simple that says I am yours." "You will have it," Wade promised. "The best ring I can afford." They were married a month later in the small church in Eager. The whole town turned out, eager to celebrate the union of the cowboy and the woman he had saved. Amelia wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Patterson had helped her make, and she carried wildflowers that Wade had picked himself. Wade wore his best suit, a slightly worn but respectable outfit that he had owned for years and almost never had occasion to wear. The ceremony was short and sweet, conducted by the same pastor who had presided over the Hendersons' funeral. The contrast was not lost on anyone. Life in the West could take away without warning, but it could also give, and it was important to celebrate those gifts when they came. After the ceremony, there was a reception at the town hall. Mrs. Patterson and several other women had prepared a feast, and there was music and dancing. Wade was not much of a dancer, but he did his best, spinning Amelia around the floor while the fiddle player sought out a lively tune. Amelia laughed with pure joy, her face flushed and her eyes bright, and Wade thought he had never seen anything more beautiful. As the evening wore on, Wade and Amelia slipped away from the celebration. Wade had borrowed a nice buggy for the occasion, and he drove Amelia out to the ranch under a sky full of stars. They did not talk much during the ride, but every time Wade glanced at Amelia, he found her looking back at him with such love that it made his chest ache in the best possible way. The ranch house was ready for them. Wade had spent the past week fixing it up, adding little touches to make it more comfortable for a woman. He had built new shelves in the kitchen, repaired the rocking chair on the porch, even put up curtains in the bedroom, though he had no idea if they were any good. Mrs. Patterson had assured him they were fine. Wade carried Amelia over the threshold, a tradition he had always thought was silly but now understood. There was something right about it, something that marked the moment as significant. This was their home now, their life together beginning in earnest. That night, lying in bed with Amelia in his arms, Wade felt a peace he had never known before. He had been content as a bachelor, satisfied with his work and his solitary life. But this was different. This was happiness, deep and real and lasting. Amelia curled against him, her head on his chest, and Wade thought about how strange life was. A few months ago, he had been riding home from a horse sale, thinking about nothing more significant than whether he needed to fix the barn roof before winter. Now he was a married man with a wife he loved more than he thought possible. "What are you thinking about?" Amelia murmured sleepily. "About how lucky I am," Wade said honestly. "About how different my life is now. Better different, much better." He kissed the top of her head. "Go to sleep, Mrs. Donovan." He felt Amelia smile against his chest. "I like the sound of that, Mrs. Donovan." "Me too." The first year of marriage was not without its challenges. Amelia had to adjust to ranch life, which was harder and more isolating than she had anticipated. The work was constant and often exhausting. There were days when the loneliness of being so far from town got to her, when she missed having neighbors close by and the easy socializing she had enjoyed at the boarding house. Wade noticed her struggles and did his best to help. He made sure to take her into town at least once a week, even when it meant losing a day of work. He encouraged her to invite people out to the ranch for meals, and he was patient when she made mistakes with the cooking or the housework, tasks she was still learning. For his part, Wade had to adjust to not being alone anymore. He had lived by himself for so long that having another person constantly present was strange at first. He had to remember to communicate, to share his thoughts and plans instead of just acting on them. He had to make room in his life for someone else's needs and wants, but despite the adjustments, the fundamental rightness of their marriage never wavered. They loved each other, and that love made the difficulties worth weathering. Slowly, they found their rhythm as a couple, learning each other's habits and preferences, figuring out how to work together as a team. Amelia proved to be a quick learner and a hard worker. Within 6 months, she could handle a horse as well as any cowboy, could shoot a rifle well enough to scare off coyotes, and could cook a meal that would make a grown man weep. She took pride in the ranch, treating it as their shared enterprise rather than just Wade's domain. She kept the books, managed supplies, and even helped with branding when extra hands were needed. Wade, in turn, learned to appreciate the ways that Amelia made his life richer. She brought beauty and order to the ranch house, transforming it from a bachelor's functional dwelling into a real home. She brought conversation and laughter, filling the silence that had once dominated his evenings. She brought perspective, challenging his assumptions and making him think about things in new ways. The town of Eager embraced Amelia fully as one of their own. She continued working at the bank part-time, riding in once or twice a week to help Mr. Wells with whatever had piled up. The extra income was helpful, but more than that, it gave Amelia a connection to the community and a sense of identity beyond just being Wade's wife. 2 years after their marriage, Amelia discovered she was pregnant. She told Wade one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, a ritual that had become sacred to them both. "I went to see Doc Howard today," Amelia said casually. "He confirmed what I suspected." Wade looked at her, not quite daring to hope. "And what was that?" Amelia took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby, sometime next spring, the doctor thinks." For a moment, Wade could not speak. He had wanted children, had dreamed of them, but he had been afraid to push the subject, afraid to pressure Amelia when he knew she was still adjusting to ranch life. Now, hearing that they would be parents, he felt joy crash over him like a wave. "Are you happy?" Amelia asked, a hint of uncertainty in her voice. Wade pulled her into his arms and held her tight. "Happy does not even begin to cover it. I am over the moon. We are going to have a baby." They held each other as the sun dipped below the horizon, both imagining the future that was coming. A child running through the ranch house, learning to ride, growing up under the wide Arizona sky. It was a beautiful vision, and Wade could not wait for it to become reality. The pregnancy was not easy. Amelia suffered from severe nausea in the early months, and Wade worried constantly. Doc Howard assured them that it was normal, that Amelia was healthy and strong, but Wade could not help fussing over her. He insisted she rest more, took over even more of the household chores, and hovered like a nervous hen. "Wade, I am pregnant, not dying," Amelia told him one day, exasperated but amused. "I can still do things." "I know that," Wade said, "but I also know that you tend to overdo it. Let me take care of you for once. You always take care of me. Then let me take care of you more." Amelia just shook her head, but she smiled, and Wade knew she appreciated the gesture even if she would not admit it. As Amelia's belly grew, Wade found himself talking to the baby, telling it about the ranch and the horses and all the things they would do together. Amelia would laugh and call him silly, but Wade did not care. He was going to be a father, and he wanted his child to know from the very beginning that it was loved and wanted. The baby arrived on a warm April morning after a long night of labor that left Wade feeling helpless and terrified. Doc Howard came to the ranch, and Mrs. Patterson came with him to help. Wade was banished to the porch, told to stay out of the way, and he paced like a caged animal while Amelia's cries came from the bedroom. When he finally heard the sharp wail of a newborn, Wade nearly collapsed with relief. Mrs. Patterson emerged a few minutes later, beaming. "You have a son, Mr. Donovan, a healthy, strong boy, and Amelia is doing fine." Wade rushed inside to find Amelia propped up in bed, exhausted but glowing with a tiny bundle in her arms. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "Come meet your son." Wade approached carefully, almost afraid he might break something. The baby was impossibly small, red-faced and squalling with a shock of dark hair. Amelia pulled back the blanket so Wade could see him properly, and Wade felt his heart expand to a size he had not known was possible. "He is perfect," Wade whispered, reaching out to touch the baby's tiny hand. The infant's fingers wrapped around Wade's finger with surprising strength, and Wade felt a fierce protectiveness surge through him. What should we name him? They had discussed names endlessly over the past months, but had never settled on one. Now, looking at their son, Amelia said, "What about Daniel? Daniel Donovan. It means God is my judge." "Daniel," Wade repeated, trying it out. "I like it. Daniel Donovan. Welcome to the world, son." Becoming parents transformed Wade and Amelia's life in ways both wonderful and challenging. The sleepless nights, the constant demands of an infant, the worry that came with every cough or cry, it was exhausting. But it was also magical. Watching Daniel grow and change, seeing Amelia with their son, being a father, these things filled Wade with a contentment so deep, it sometimes brought tears to his eyes. Daniel proved to be a good baby, healthy and curious. He had Amelia's blue eyes and Wade's dark hair, and from an early age it was clear he had inherited his father's love of the outdoors. As soon as he could walk, he wanted to be outside, chasing chickens and petting horses and getting into everything. Wade taught him to ride before he was 3, sitting him in the saddle and leading the gentlest mare around the corral. Daniel's delighted laughter echoed across the ranch, and Wade thought his heart might burst from happiness. This was everything he had ever wanted, even if he had not known to want it until it was his. When Daniel was 2, Amelia became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and when their daughter arrived in the fall, it was a quicker labor. They named her Sarah, after Amelia's mother, and she was as beautiful as her namesake. Where Daniel was adventurous and bold, Sarah was thoughtful and gentle, content to sit and watch the world around her with solemn eyes. The years passed in a blur of growth and change. Daniel started school in Eager, riding into town with Amelia several days a week. Sarah followed a few years later, proving to be as sharp as her brother but more studious. Wade and Amelia's ranch prospered, expanding gradually as they could afford it. They added more cattle, built a larger barn, hired a full-time hand to help with the work. Through it all, Wade and Amelia's love for each other remained the foundation of their life. They still sat on the porch in the evenings when they could, watching the sunset and talking about their day. They still stole kisses when the children were not looking, still laughed at each other's jokes, still found joy in the simple fact of being together. One evening, when Daniel was 8 and Sarah was 5, the family sat around the dinner table and Daniel asked, "Pa, how did you and Ma meet?" Wade and Amelia exchanged a glance and Wade smiled. "Well, son, it is quite a story. It all started when I was riding home from a horse sale and I saw something in the desert." He told the story, with Amelia filling in details here and there. He told them about finding her barely conscious, about the long ride to Eager, about the Hendersons and the outlaws. He told them about falling in love, about the proposal by the creek, about their wedding. "So Ma almost died?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide. "She would have if not for your pa," Amelia said, reaching over to take Wade's hand. "He saved my life." "I think it was mutual," Wade said quietly. "You saved me too in your own way." "How?" Daniel wanted to know. Wade thought about how to explain it to a child. "I had a good life before I met your mother, but I did not have a great life. I did not know what I was missing until she came along. She made everything better, brighter, more meaningful. That is what love does if you are lucky enough to find it." Years continued to roll by. Daniel grew into a strong young man who loved ranching as much as his father did. Sarah, clever and kind, decided she wanted to be a teacher, inspired by stories of her grandfather. Wade and Amelia supported both children in their dreams, proud of the people they were becoming. When Wade turned 50, he looked back on his life with profound gratitude. He thought about that day in the desert, the moment when he had spotted Amelia lying by those rocks. It had been pure chance that he had been riding that particular trail at that particular time. A few hours earlier or later, a different route, and he never would have found her. She would have died out there, and he would have continued his solitary existence, never knowing what he was missing. But chance, or fate, or divine providence, whatever you wanted to call it, had brought them together. And from that terrible beginning, something beautiful had grown, a love that had lasted decades, a family, a life rich with meaning and joy. Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if things had gone differently? Amelia asked him one evening. They were alone, the children grown and gone, Daniel running the ranch with Wade and Sarah teaching in Eager. It was just the two of them again, much as it had been in the beginning. "Sometimes," Wade admitted, "I imagine I would have been fine, lonely but fine. I would have kept ranching, kept to myself. Eventually I would have gotten old and died, probably without anyone much noticing." "That is depressing." "But it is not what happened," Wade said, pulling her close. "What happened is that I found you, or you found me, depending on how you look at it. And you gave me a life I never even knew I wanted. You gave me love, family, happiness. You gave me everything." Amelia rested her head on his shoulder. "You gave me those things too. When I was lying in that desert, dying, I had given up. I thought that was the end. But then you appeared and you told me I was safe with you now, and I was. I have been safe with you every day since." "And you always will be," Wade promised, "for whatever time we have left." They had years yet, as it turned out. Good years filled with grandchildren and laughter and the satisfaction of a life well lived. Wade worked the ranch until he was nearly 70, only retiring when his knees and back, finally insisted he slow down. Daniel took over fully, running the place with the same dedication Wade had shown, and it gave Wade satisfaction to know that what he had built would continue. When Wade was 75, he became ill. It was nothing dramatic, just the slow failing that comes with age. His heart was giving out, Doc Howard's successor told him. It could be months or years, but the end was coming. Wade took the news calmly, having long since made his peace with mortality. What worried him was Amelia. She was a few years younger and still healthy, and the thought of leaving her alone terrified him. But Amelia, when he shared the news, was braver than he was. "We have had more than 40 years together," she said, holding his hands tightly. "That is more than most people ever get. I will not waste whatever time we have left being sad about what is coming. We will make the most of every day." And they did. Wade's decline was slow, giving them time to say everything that needed to be said, to revisit favorite places, to gather the family and make memories. On what turned out to be his last day, Wade lay in the bed where both his children had been born, surrounded by everyone he loved. "I am not afraid," he told Amelia, his voice weak but steady. "I have had a good life, better than I deserved." "You deserved every bit of it," Amelia said fiercely, tears streaming down her face. "You were the best man I ever knew. I love you," Wade whispered. "From that first moment I saw you in the desert until now, you were always the best thing that ever happened to me." "I love you too," Amelia said, kissing his forehead. "You are safe with me now. Rest." Wade smiled at that, appreciating the echo of his own words from so long ago. His eyes drifted closed, and with his wife's hand in his, he slipped away peacefully. Amelia lived another 5 years, long enough to see her grandchildren grown and starting families of their own. She remained on the ranch that Wade had built, surrounded by the life they had created together. She spoke of him often, keeping his memory alive for the younger generations who had never known a world without the Donovan ranch. When Amelia finally passed, it was in her sleep, peacefully, just as Wade had gone. The family buried her next to him in the small cemetery in Eager, the same cemetery where the Hendersons had been laid to rest so many decades before. The headstone was simple, bearing both their names and the dates that marked the span of their lives. But beneath those names, at Amelia's request, was a single line that told their whole story. He found her in the desert, and she found home in him. The ranch continued for generations, passed down through the family, each generation adding their own chapter to the story. But it all went back to that moment in the desert, to Wade's decision to stop and help, to Amelia's determination to survive. From that chance meeting came a love story that endured, a family that flourished, and a legacy that lasted long after both of them were gone. In the end, that was what mattered. Not the hardships they had faced or the obstacles they had overcome, but the love they had built and shared. Wade had been right when he told Amelia she was safe with him. She had been safe, cherished, loved for every day they had together. And he had been equally safe with her, held and valued and made complete by her presence in his life. It was a simple story, really. A cowboy found a lost woman in the desert. He saved her life, and she transformed his. They fell in love, built a life together, raised a family, and lived happily ever after. Not perfectly, because life is never perfect, but happily nonetheless. And in the wild, unforgiving landscape of the Arizona Territory, where survival was never guaranteed and tomorrow was never promised, that was more than enough. It was everything.